I don't speak Igbo. When I meet older Igbo Nigerians and they learn my name, they usually ask, Kedu? And I awkwardly, very awkwardly, answer, Odinma. Then I pray that they don't continue speaking Igbo because I usually don't understand the next thing that they say. When it does happen, too often there's a look of disappointment, and sometimes I'm directly or indirectly told that I'm incomplete or not a real Nigerian. I'm a writer, so I have a habit of peeking between, around, underneath, and inside of words to see meaning. But I'm very proud to be Nigerian and American. While growing up, my parents spoke Igbo at home. They spoke it to each other, to relatives on the phone, to Igbo friends who'd visit, but they didn't speak it to my siblings and me. So because we lived in a white Chicago suburb, I don't say predominantly white because we were the first black family to move into it, and that produced some very fun, very American results. My siblings and I grew up speaking perfect Midwestern English. Our English was so perfect that when we called the black hair salons to make an appointment, they'd think we were white and that we had the wrong number. Still, there were little things that hinted at foreign influence. For example, even today, I call the large, tasty banana-like fruits that we fry plantain instead of the Americanized plantain. And I call the yummy, chewy fish found sometimes in dishes like egusi soup stuck fish instead of stock fish. And when I'm behind the wheel of the angry Chicago roads, I find myself calling the crazy drivers around me idiot. Or mumu. My parents began taking my siblings and me to Nigeria when we were very young. We'd stay in Lagos or Port Harcourt for some days, and then we'd travel to stay in my father's and my mother's villages in Imo State. When we were kids, we'd be delirious with delight while there. We'd eat delicious meals we rarely ever had in the States. They'd be prepared specifically and especially by our grandmothers or our aunties. We'd hang out with cousins and explore the nearby lagoon and go with them to the market. And then we'd try to speak Igbo. These attempts amused everyone so much. Our Western-trained tongues would horribly mangle the language. People laughed and laughed and laughed. The younger village kids would follow us around snickering and mocking us like some sort of really irritating, intrusive Shakespearean chorus. I can't speak for my siblings, but eventually it got to me, and I began to feel too embarrassed to try. I could understand a lot of the language, but I stopped attempting to speak it. Over the years, my lack of fluency would be pointed out at Nigerian parties, by relatives in and outside of Nigeria, and by complete and total strangers. Oh, you cannot speak. Oh, that is such a shame. This translated to, of course, as I said before, the implication that I was not a real Nigerian. I'd always want to respond, I was born in the United States. What do you expect of me? I'm proud to be American and Nigerian. On the flip side, my experience growing up here in the United States has gained me equally interesting judgment. Between the tender ages of 7 and 12, I lived with my family in a suburb of Chicago called South Holland, Illinois. It was the 80s, and my father was a young cardiovascular surgeon moving up in the ranks, and my mother was in the process of finishing her PhD in health administration. They were young immigrants with 3 girls and soon also a son, and a rather idealistic view of the world despite the racism they'd encountered along the way. So when they encountered South Holland, Illinois, they saw a beautiful, quiet, quaint suburbs that wasn't too far from Chicago's South Side where my father was practicing. Being immigrants, they didn't have that African-American radar that would have also pegged the place as racist as hell. My siblings and I were all athletes. We all played semi-pro tennis, and I ran track. And thank goodness, because if it weren't for the fact that we could run really, really fast, we'd have been beaten up daily by older white high school students. These students, along with our classmates and sometimes teacher, taught us words like nigger and taught us phrases like porch monkey. Later, we moved to a more diverse neighborhood, and the African American kids there also taught us phrases like African booty scratcher. And we wondered why the kids there would mock our Nigerian names and then make clicking sounds afterwards. It's no wonder that I went on to write science fiction and fantasy, forms of writing that dwell on borders and love to deal with themes of otherness and the alien. No matter where I went, I felt like an outsider. As I grew older and things became clearer, I started calling myself Nigerian. Because I lived on American and Nigerian borders, I found myself more and more playing the role of the explainer. When I was in Nigeria, a man once asked me, "So, do African American women really walk around only in their panties?" I looked at him like he was crazy. African Americans have asked me, "Do people in Africa wear clothes?" Just 3 weeks ago, and I'm not kidding, it was 3 weeks ago, I had an African American student ask me if there were buildings in Africa. And everyone else in the class looked at me for an answer. In all of these cases, I found myself calmly, logically, and colorfully explaining. For me, moving from explainer to storyteller was a smooth transition. Somehow, maybe it was because my parents kept taking me to Nigeria and those trips were so full, or maybe it was because those trips happened in the midst of my American experience, but I've always been very secure with who I was. I am Nigerian and I'm American, and no one can tell me or try to shame me or force me to be anything else. I was born and raised in the United States, and my foundation was and is Nigeria. Though there are times when these